remember what I was told. That he was telling a joke, and he told the juror, or he told the officer, you know, he made a reference to telling a joke about why did it take 7 shots to shoot Jacob Blake, something to that effect. It dealt with shots and it dealt with Jacob Blake. And I did reveal it to you attorneys yesterday, and at the close of the day, after giving it some thought, there was a request by the state to excuse juror 7 before I do anything.
Right.
But I did want to get your position. Or you don't want to form a position until you've heard from him?
I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Okay, and I think you're right. Let's
just add a little bit, Your Honor.
Oh, please do.
Yes. What I heard from you yesterday, and I understand this is literally fourth hand from the juror to Lieutenant Zerline to you to us. So I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what the juror said, but it was my understanding it was something along the lines of, why did the Kenosha police shoot Jacob Blake 7 times? That's what I thought you had said to us. And
that may have been.
Sure. That puzzled me for a moment, and you made it sound like it was the beginning of a joke, so I wondered what the rest of the joke is. It's my understanding that the rest of the joke is because they ran out of bullets. To me, that is, anyone who would find that funny would be finding the implication that if the Kenosha police had more than 7 bullets, they would have continued to shoot Jacob Blake as funny. Which I do not. The joke is in bad taste. There are a plethora of bad jokes out there about everything to do with all of this. This is one of them. But I think the rest of this joke, as it were, suggests some sort of racial bias, which I think comes into play in the subtext of this case. And beyond that, for a juror in the midst of a trial like this, which stems from the Jacob Blake... May I finish, Your Honor?
No, you can't. Because I think that the better course is to let the juror respond, and then I'll certainly want to hear the rest of what you have to say. But I would think it would become better after he's had a chance to respond.
Understood. Thank you.
So, is he? I assume he's on this level. He's upstairs? Or would you ask him to come down, please? Yeah, get a deputy.
Is there anybody in back?
Your Honor, the other matter that was pending was Mr. Binger's objection to my question.
Yeah.
I will withdraw that question. It's going to come in with the next witness, and that's fine.
As you wish. Then the next thing is a note from a juror.
We came this morning.
Well, I've got 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, the one from yesterday. This came at the end of the day yesterday.
Well, I gave you.
I think you've already been given copies. Yes, please. Bring them over. Bring them over here. So I assume that's easier than him squeezing through here. It's been a challenge for him. And this says, I heard the name of Lucas Zanin something in today's, does that say video? Is that what that says? I heard the name of Lucas Zanin something, video maybe. In today's testimony, I never heard his name in the jury polling, which I'm quite sure it was in there. I know of someone with that name, have never discussed anything about this case prior to this, nor was I aware he did video of the happenings. For all I know, it's not even the same person, but did want this disclosed to you. Anybody want to do anything about this letter?
I would just note, I think the name was read by both sides.
I was quite sure that it had been read.
Beyond that, I don't think any action needs to be taken.
Is he a videographer too?
He took what's been referred to as the video on 63rd, looking at car source. It's already been played.
Oh, okay, no, okay.
It's not a common name, so I'm sure it's the same Lucas Zanin.
Yeah. You want to do anything about it?
No.
State?
No.
Okay. This is the one I just received. And it just says number 49 express. I guess this is probably written by one of the bailiffs. Number 49 expressed that he cannot see videos with his trifocals mentioned in jury room after day was over. Number 49 having trouble seeing due to his trifocals.
Can we maybe talk to the bailiff and put him in a seat where he can see?
Let's hope. Number 49. See if there's a better location where he can sit and still be able to see the videos.
Well, I don't
And
know if
also,
she's here, is she?
if there's any videos that he definitely feels he needs to view again, we need to know about that. Okay. Then, one more thing. After I took a poll from the jury yesterday about the heating conditions in here, it came out about two to one in favor of saying that the temperature was okay. Not everyone agreed with that, and so I had it mildly adjusted because it had been turned down quite a bit the day before. While we were in the library on Monday, apparently it did get quite warm in here. So I said, well, turn it up halfway to where you turned it down. So I'm going to ask the jury how they thought the temperature was yesterday. The reason I'm doing that is because my wife caught a little bit of the action on television yesterday and told me that the media were complaining that it was stiflingly hot in. Is that true? How many in the audience portion, media or not, felt it was extraordinarily warm in here yesterday? You were cold. Okay, well, I may bring my heater up here, so I'll let you sit up here and try to benefit from that. Nobody's complaining. Well, someone apparently did on TV, so I don't know. Good morning, sir. Can you give him a handheld? Yeah, thank you.
The court reporter.
Sure. Can you move over so the reporter can see you? Just about 10 feet over towards the back door, or the front door, rather. A little bit more.
Right here?
Right there is good? Okay. The reason I asked you to come down was I was told that while you were being escorted to the car the other day, that you began to tell a joke about the shooting of Jacob Blake, and I wanted to see if is that accurate or not. It is? Okay. Are you comfortable repeating what the joke was, or do you want to just leave it alone? I'm going to tell you that I spoke about. Well, I guess I'll hear from Mr. Do you want to finish what you were saying? I will tell you that I've talked quite a bit about public confidence in the outcome of the trial, and regardless of whether the issue is as grave as you presented it in terms of inner feelings, it is clear that the appearance of bias is present, and it would seriously undermine the outcome of the case. So that in itself would be sufficient cause for discharge, but if you want to expand on that, you're welcome to.
No, Your Honor.
Did you want to say anything, defense?
If number 7's unwilling to repeat it, what it was, I think we're at a disadvantage, and I suppose his unwillingness can be taken in the worst light. So, based on the unwillingness at this point, I think it's probably the proper course.
Okay. All right. I think the best thing under the circumstances, I'm going to dismiss you from the jury, sir. And we do thank you for taking the time to come down here. Thank you.
My feelings is that it was nothing to do with the case. It wasn't anything to do with Kyle and his 7 charges.
Here, and I have not. I've not stated that you have. It's not. One of the things that I have to do when I have to make judgments, I try to confine my judgments to the things I have to judge, and not to forming opinions about other people other than that. So I don't want to get into that. The point I'm making is that the public needs to be confident that this is a fair trial, and I think even at the very most, it was bad judgment to tell a joke of that nature. Okay, so that's okay. Thank you very much, sir. Did I say at the very least or at the very most? At the very least, it was bad judgment. All right. Now, anything else other than checking the jury's temperature?
If the question is being withdrawn, then there's no need to resolve the objection, and we can continue with the testimony, I think.
Splendid.
Judge, I would ask that if you address the jury generally and instruct them that if they cannot hear or see anything, to let us know immediately, as you've already gone through
Yes, that's
2 days.
That's an excellent point.
I told him to be the first one down so that he could sit wherever would be what's best for him. The videos he talked about the FBI shoot
Okay.
that I couldn't see. So
Okay.
I told him to wait and then talk to you directly because he's got tricycles.
Okay.
And that's his issue is trying to focus
Sure.
to move as fast as they do. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. I still need. No, he's free to go. Okay. Ready to go?
Hello.
Would you come down, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
38. I'll put it on. You can keep it then if you want. But yeah. So yeah, 85 is 38.
Okay, thank you.
Would you put in that in the fridge, please? Thank you. Just got the first one down. This one? Yeah, there's a request. You can all be seated. Everybody can be seated, except whoever's going to move that monitor. Court TV wants it there. Well, but the juror, I got to serve this. The jurors come before Court TV, and I think Court TV's been doing a wonderful job, but we can't have that monitor there. Pardon me?
Well, at least for right now.
Well, why don't you call somebody up from Court TV and see if there's a way that'll work for everybody?
They can't see Mr. Richards when he's looking. The TV is in front of Mr. Richards.
Yeah, I think down might be a good start.
No, but I think you gotta expand.
Will it fit over here where we've been using the easel?
We run into the same problem with that one.
Court TV seems to be okay with that, so.
Is okay with what?
Moving it over by the bar.
Okay. All right. Now the next thing is. Yesterday, if you recall, I asked you about your comfort level in terms of temperature, and you took a vote, and it was about 2-1 in favor of that things had been just about right. I thought it was cold. And guess what? So I had them nudge it up a little bit. Now, I shouldn't have told you that. I should have just asked you how was the temperature yesterday. How many felt it was too warm in here yesterday? How many felt it was too cold? How many were just perfect? Look at that. Wonderful. What a wonderful jury to work with. Okay. And finally, Mr. Number 7 is no longer on the jury. I've dismissed him, and so we'll proceed with the 19 of you. Okay. Anything else? Let's go.
Show me what's been marked as Exhibit 37. Could you tell me what that is?
This is a search warrant for Gage Grosskreuz's cell phone.
And what is the date and time that's on the front page of that at the lower left corner?
September 23rd, 2020 at 8:12 p.m.
Okay. And that was the day before the interview of Gage Grosskreuz.
I believe so.
Move Exhibit 37 into evidence.
Is there objection?
No. Detective, on August 26th of 2020, you were at the Antioch Police Department and informed Kyle Rittenhouse that he was being detained for the charge of first-degree murder at approximately 6:40 a.m., correct?
That sounds about right.
And a criminal complaint which brought him into this court was filed the next day in consultation with the district attorney's office on August 27th of 2020, correct?
Correct.
Now, you, in your course of investigation, wrote a lengthy police report, approximately 57 pages.
Yes.
And that summarizes, for lack of a better word, much of your involvement in this case, not all of it.
Yes.
Okay. I'm referring to page of your report, 55 of 57. You received a thumb drive from the FBI, correct?
Detective Ansaramian received that thumb drive.
You viewed information from the videos of that thumb drive.
Sorry, I was thinking about the drone footage, or the fixed-wing aircraft footage that we saw here. That was obtained by Detective Ansaramian, but I also received a thumb drive, yes, from the FBI.
And specifically, I'm referring to FBI video AE5, if we could have that on the screen. And I'm going to read from your report and tell me if I'm reading correctly, and then we'll play the video.
Okay.
It's on. Page 55 of 57, second to last paragraph, stating in your words, At 41 seconds into the video, something appears to draw the attention of the videographer. The video quickly pans to the right, parent to the north, close parent, and directly to Kyle Rittenhouse and Joseph Rosenbaum. When the video reaches them, a male voice is heard yelling, "Gun, gun, gun. You won't do shit, motherfucker!" exclamation mark. This appears to be Joseph Rosenbaum yelling. Do you remember that?
Yes.
This is the video you're speaking of?
Yes.
Okay, please play the video. Started at 1.
Duramax just got, that Duramax got fucking beat, yo. Damn, homies out here. Bro. This guy almost slapped. Bro, damn. Whooping.
You heard that at 41 seconds?
Yes.
And that was, could we go back 10 seconds? Back 10 seconds.
Damn.
Stop. And in the upper right of the exhibit, I'm pointing right now at Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse, correct?
Correct.
Right behind him is the masked Mr. Rosenbaum, correct?
Correct.
And you hear the words that Mr. Rosenbaum uses, and you opine that that is in fact Mr. Rosenbaum's voice, correct?
Yes.
And that opinion is based upon you listening to other videos that have Mr. Rosenbaum's voice on them, correct?
Yes, and also what is depicted in the video.
Okay. And that's Kyle with a gun and Mr. Rosenbaum chasing him.
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Detective Howard, I just have a few follow-up questions. Yesterday you were asked about that search warrant that you obtained for Mr. Grosskreuz's phone. Is that correct?
Correct.
At the time that you obtained that search warrant, did you consider Mr. Grosskreutz to be a victim of a crime?
Yes.
You mentioned something called Marcy's Law yesterday. What is that, as you understand it?
Marcy's Law is a relatively new law in the state of Wisconsin which grants victims more rights.
I would ask the court to take judicial notice that on April 7th, 2020, Wisconsin voters amended the Wisconsin State Constitution under a ballot initiative called Marcy's Law. That took effect on May 4th, 2020. Will the court take judicial notice of that?
There are some things that even lawyers can't argue about, and they can be put in a category called judicial notice. For example, no one could reasonably contend that Christmas doesn't fall on the 25th of December, so that can be judicially noticed, and the lawyers are agreed in this case that that something not in dispute in this case is that the voters on the date which he's indicated approved an amendment to the Wisconsin Constitution that is called, I don't know if its official name is Marcy's Law, but its everyday usage name is Marcy's Law. Any question about that? That was adopted as part of the state constitution. What was the date?
The effective date was May 4th, 2020.
Okay, it was not adopted on that date, but became effective as of that date. Okay, thank you.
The Exhibit 37, the search warrant for Gage Grosskreutz was obtained approximately 4 months after that on September 23rd, 2020. Does that sound right to you?
Correct.
And I think you mentioned yesterday that at that time it wasn't clear to you and the department what the effect of Marcy's law and those enhanced protections for victims would have on your ability to get search warrants for phones in this type of situation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so my intent when I wrote the search warrant was to obtain more information, and I was not thinking about Marcy's law as I was writing the search warrant, but started thinking about it afterwards and wanted to err on the side of caution in respect to Mr. Grosskreitz's rights.
You were also asked questions about whether or not your interviews with certain people were recorded. Can you explain to the jury what the normal practice is as a detective with the Kenosha Police Department when you decide what interviews you do are going to be recorded and which ones you may not record?
We typically will always record custodial subject. Those interviews will always be in a recorded interview room. Typically, we will put witnesses and complainants in non-recording interview rooms to obtain their statement. In this investigation, we put a lot of witnesses in. We have 4 rooms, interview rooms, in our detective bureau. 3 of which are always recording, no matter what. And one of these rooms is delegated as a room that we will put complaining witnesses and witnesses in that room, so we can conduct an interview without it being recorded. The interviews that we conducted throughout the course of this investigation, we didn't intend to interview or record all of them, but some of those interviews were taking place inside of interview rooms that are always recording. So when we were able to go back, we were able to, even though we didn't intend to record those, we were able to pull those. But the ones that were conducted in the interview room that isn't always recording, there isn't a record of video and audio of that.
Is it fair to say, Detective, that when you're dealing with someone that you consider to be the victim of a crime, you typically do not record those interviews with audio or visual? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You were asked a question regarding the individual who has not been identified, the individual who came in and attempted to kick Mr. Rittenhouse in the face. And you indicated, despite your efforts, that person has not come forward and you've not been able to identify him. Is that correct?
Correct.
In the 14 months that you've been investigating this case, have you experienced individuals who have been reluctant to come forward and provide information?
We experienced a lot of reluctance in gathering information in this investigation.
Why do you think that is? Fair enough. You were asked a question regarding Mr. Rosenbaum, and at some point during the evening there's an allegation that he was holding a chain. You've seen photos or something to that effect, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Based on your investigation and your understanding of the timing of all of the events of that evening, do you know approximately when in the evening Mr. Rosenbaum had that chain?
I know location is going to be the area of St. James, because based on the information that we were able to gather, it appears that he obtained that chain from the St. James campus. And so it's hard to put an exact time on it, but I would estimate a couple hours before the incident at Sheridan and 63rd takes place.
Before you were shot by the defendant?
Yes.
In your investigation, have you seen any indication that Mr. Rosenbaum possessed that chain at the Ultimate gas station on the southeast corner of 60th and Sheridan?
No.
The defense has alluded to Mr. Rosenbaum being involved in verbal disputes, altercations, whatever you want to call them. There's a dumpster involved, etc. At any point in any of those scenes at Ultimate gas station, does Mr. Rosenbaum have any sort of weapon in his hand?
Just a plastic bag.
Just the plastic bag?
Yes.
No gun?
No.
No knife?
No.
No chain?
Not at Ultimate Gas, no.
No baseball bat or club or any kind like that?
No.
As far as you can tell in all those videos, is the only thing he's ever holding in his hand that plastic bag?
South of 60th Street, yes.
You've seen the video of Mr. Rosenbaum walking south on Sheridan towards the 63rd Street car source where he is shot by the defendant, correct?
Yes.
As he's walking down that street, is there any indication at any point that he's ever armed with anything?
Just the plastic bag in his hand.
Doesn't have a gun, correct?
Correct.
No knife?
No knife.
This is a different part of the sequence. No gun?
No.
No knife?
No.
No baseball bat or club?
No.
No chain?
No.
Obviously, in the end, at the time that he is shot and killed by the defendant at the 63rd Street car source, is there any evidence in the record of any kind that you've seen as the lead detective in the case that Mr. Rosenbaum was armed with a weapon?
No, he had the plastic bag which he threw and then had nothing in his hands after that.
I want to talk about that incident at the 63rd car source where the defendant shoots and kills the defendant, or Mr. Rosenbaum. Can we please pull up exhibit number 19? Can we please play exhibit number 19? This is the video that is entitled Drew Hernandez Shooting Video. For the record, I'm just going to point out the parties as they're walking here. For the jury's benefit, we've heard testimony about this. This is a video that's taken as people are walking south on Sheridan towards the 63rd Car Street. This individual is Richie McGinnis, and this is the defendant in front of him. Agreed? Yes. Please continue. Detective Howard, on the screen there, it appears to show the car source dealership, correct?
The car source at 63rd and Sheridan, yes.
Okay. And would you help us to understand, maybe using the laser pointer on the map, approximately where this person would be standing when they're taking this video?
Right. Drew Hernandez at this time is on the north end of the car source, so looks like he's standing in the grass if you look at the bottom of the screen. So I'd say he's right about here, and his video is pointing south into the parking lot. So I'd put him right about here in the grass.
The property that you are pointing to there on the map, which is just to the north of the car source, what is located on that lot?
That's one house.
So this individual, Mr. Hernandez, is in the yard of that house. Is that fair to say?
Yes, this house right here.
Okay.
And the grass right there.
All right, please continue the video. Lower right-hand corner of that screen, there appears to be an object laying on the ground. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you identify that for us?
That is the plastic bag that Joseph Rosenbaum can be seen throwing in other videos.
All right, please continue the video. Can we now please go back and show the FBI, actually no, I'm sorry. I believe it is exhibit number 25. The FBI video with markings, please. Detective Howard, in this exhibit number 25, I think we've already established that person of interest number 1 with the circle around him is Joseph Rosenbaum. Is that correct?
Correct.
And this shows where he runs immediately upon entering the car source lot. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury, based on what you're seeing there, where it appears he's located at the moment of this video?
Pretty close to where Drew Hernandez was standing in the last video we watched. So this right here is going to be that. I'd put Mr. Rosenbaum right about here at the far north end of the car source parking lot. I think it's important to note that on this map, the car source lot is filled with cars, but as we can see in the aerial footage, it's not filled with cars at this point in time. So I would put him Mr. Rosenbaum right about here.
Okay. Please continue the video for just a couple more seconds, then I'll have you stop. All right. Go ahead and stop that, please. Now, can we go back to the last video, which is exhibit number 19?
The bailiff advises, I'm sorry, but someone had inquired about using the laser on the screen, and I can't tell you why, but the lasers do not work on the screen. That's why we have to use Sister Marcian's pointer for that. There it is. But and I knew it well. But I apologize that we don't have, I don't know whatever.
Can we please play exhibit number 19? Detective Howard, after watching that last video, which showed the movements of Mr. Rosenbaum, are you able to tell on this video, I know this doesn't show Mr. Rosenbaum in the proximity of where he originally went when he got to car source, but are you able to tell on this video where he went initially? Does that make sense?
I would put him at the approximately the front passenger tire of that white sedan, adjacent to where that gentleman is standing.
Okay. Thank you. Now, there's been a lot of testimony regarding the shot that was fired by Joshua Zeminski. Did Joshua Zeminski fire that shot in the direction of any particular person?
Objection. We doesn't know that.
If he knows, he can answer. Well, how would he know? You're going to have to set the foundation as to how
Absolutely.
he would know.
Have you watched the videos that show Mr. Zeminski firing that shot?
Yes.
Where is he pointing the gun?
Straight up in the air.
You also testified that the lapse in time between that gunshot and the defendant shooting Mr. Rosenbaum was 2.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds. Is that right?
Approximately, yes.
You said you based that on timing it with a stopwatch?
Yes.
Did you do that based on one of the videos in the case?
No, I believe I did it with approximately 5 or 6 of the videos.
So you went through 5 or 6 videos, and each one of them timed it with a stopwatch and determined that they're all right about 2.5 seconds?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
In video 19, which was just shown, and you pointed to the... Can you bring that up? Where they're standing on the grass. Mr. Hernandez. Bring it up, please. Just go forward to further. A little bit more. Stop. You can play from there, please. Stop. When you talk about the white sedan, that's the one that's centered right in the middle of the frame now that's been frozen, correct?
Correct.
And it's your belief in sinking in your mind when looking at the aerial footage that he would have went up approximately to the driver's side passenger tire?
No, you said the driver's side passenger tire. The passengers, the front passenger tire, I would approximate that that's where Mr. Rosenbaum went.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Are we talking here or between these two vehicles? And when I'm pointing at the vehicle, I'm pointing at the white sedan and what looks to be like a silver late model Cadillac.
I would estimate the white sedan that's closer to us in this video.
So you're saying he's here?
I would estimate there.
Okay, and not between these two vehicles, correct?
That's my estimation, yes.
Can we have the video that was just shown to him, the aerial video, please? Stop. Person of interest 1 is Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a vehicle I'm pointing at right here, which is the vehicle nearest the only house on that block.
Yes.
So he's not on the passenger side. He's between what I would refer to as, if the Duramax is car number 1, there's car number 2, the late model Cadillac, and then the white sedan.
Yes.
So he's between them.
That's what it appeared. The FBI has a better depiction of that, yes.
So when you testify that he was at the passenger side of the white vehicle, that's not correct?
Not correct.
And you see person of interest 1, which is my client, Mr. Rittenhouse, he doesn't go into these cars after him, correct?
Oh, he's person of interest 2 on this video, and Mr. Rittenhouse does not. He stays closer to the sidewalk area.
And he walks down in this location to the corner of the Duramax vehicle.
In that approximate area, yes.
Where he's then, the individual comes up from behind him, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Mr. Rosenbaum comes around those vehicles towards Mr. Rittenhouse.
And we're not suggesting, or excuse me, you're not suggesting that there was more than one chase, correct?
At any point in the evening, or?
No, just car source 3 that night at approximately 11:50 p.m.
On this car source property, I observed one chase.
And you testified on redirect about Marcy's Law. You remember that?
Yes.
And you were told by someone, or Detective Antarami was told by somebody about Marcy's Law, and you couldn't go in the phone even though there was a signed search warrant, correct?
It was erring on the side of caution.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your department went into Mr. Huber's phone without a search warrant.
He's deceased.
He's still a complaining witness, decedent, or victim, however you want to label him, correct?
I think it's different. If someone is deceased, then they don't even have the ability to give consent.
They're a state, correct? What I'm getting at is, you went in the phone without a warrant for Mr. Huber, correct?
We don't need search warrants if they're deceased.
That's your opinion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You went and you got a search warrant, which you drafted and were the affiant, meaning you swore to it, for Mr. Groskwitz's phone, correct?
Correct.
And then it was never executed, correct?
No, because I did not feel comfortable with my knowledge of Marcy's Law, and I wanted to err on the side of caution with that.
He's nodding at you right now, isn't he?
He's what?
I'm pointing at Mr. Binger as he's nodding at you, correct?
I was not even looking at Mr. Binger. I was looking at you.
Okay. Last night, during the break overnight, did you talk about this testimony?
No.
Nobody from... Can I finish the question?
You can finish.
Nobody from the Racine Kenosha District Attorney's Office about this issue. Never talked about it.
No.
Okay. If you don't have a search warrant, you can get into the phone other ways, correct?
Which phone are we talking about?
Groskwitz's.
I see you have consent on one side or a search warrant on the other side.
Okay. And consent was asked for, correct?
Correct.
Was turned down, correct?
Correct.
Nothing further. Nothing further, I said. I'm sorry.
Okay. You may step down, sir.
The state calls Richie McGinnis.
Stand please, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
If you could please make sure to pull that microphone close and speak as loud as you can into it. Thank you. Could you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Richie McGinnis. Richie McGinnis. RICHIEMCGINNISS.
How are you currently employed?
I'm the video director for the Daily Caller.
What is the Daily Caller?
It's a news website.
How long have you been working for the Daily Caller?
Since May of 2017.
When you say you are the video editor, you said?
Technically chief video director.
Chief video director. What are your responsibilities?
I oversee all of the video content that goes up on the website and all of our video and social media platforms.
Is it fair to say that the Daily Caller is an online news source as opposed to, say, a newspaper or a magazine?
Yeah, there's no print.
Okay. And what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's in Middle Eastern history and Arabic from Georgetown University.
Would you consider yourself a journalist?
I would consider myself somebody who works alongside journalists every day.
Okay. When you say you work alongside them, what are the different roles that you have versus the journalists that you work alongside?
So basically the journalists are the ones who actually post the articles. I'm the one who, for example, if a journalist is on a location, they record a video. I'm the person who helps them get that video onto whatever platform necessary, as well as packaging the video, distributing it, and just helping them with any technical issues associated with that.
Who were the founders of the Daily Caller?
Neil Patel and Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson is a Fox News personality, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And did there come a time where you personally showed an interest in covering some of the protests that are going on around the country?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell us about what your focus was in that regard?
Well, at the time that the protests erupted in Memorial Day of 2020, it was very clear from the onset that actually two of our reporters, Jorge and Shelby, who were with me in Kenosha, they were in Washington, D.C. I was actually with my family in New York at the time. But that first weekend, there were violent riots in Washington, D.C. And after that weekend, it was very evident to me that Shelby and Jorge, being young and brave folks, were able to capture aspects of what was going on that I didn't see elsewhere in the media. And that's when it became clear to me that we could show the public a side of what was happening that the corporate press wasn't keen to show.
You mentioned that these began around Memorial Day of 2020. Was that in part because of what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis?
Yes, correct.
As far as you personally, you talked about some events in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. Were you one of the folks that was covering any of that?
I returned back to Washington. I was in New York with my family. I returned back to Washington on actually Memorial Day, that Monday. And starting on that day, I was on the ground with our reporters.
Other than Washington, D.C., over the summer of 2020, did you go around to other locations to cover these types of events?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We went to Seattle. We went to Portland. We were in Washington, D.C., obviously New York, Kenosha. And, basically it was very clear to us that while, for example, cable news correspondents would go in and say what was going on, and then they'd leave and go back to their hotels, we just hung out in these places for hours and hours on end, and we just used our phones to show the public what was happening.
At these events that you covered in Seattle, Portland, etc., were you ever personally exposed to violence or rioting or arson or anything along those lines?
Yes.
Tell us about some of the experiences that you had at those locations.
Well, Portland, for example, there was a lot of clashing with law enforcement. There was a lot of, I saw incendiary devices thrown at police. And Seattle was a situation where we did see some violent clashes between protesters and counter-protesters, and the same in New York as well. Police breaking up the Occupy protests, people clashing with the police, and in fact, in New York, for example, if you're one of these people in there, we're dressed up to look just like everybody else. But if you film one of those violent interactions, then it's only a matter of time if somebody sees you that the crowd will turn on you, and that did happen in New York to Shelby and I.
When the crowd turned on you in New York, did you feel like your safety, your personal safety, was at risk?
Yes.
Did you actually suffer any sort of injuries as a result of that?
I bear hugged Shelby and I dragged her out, and no, I did not.
Okay.
I have suffered injuries in these zones, but not in that instance.
Okay. I want to move forward to Kenosha. Everybody here is familiar with the shooting of Jacob Blake on Sunday night, August 23rd, 2020. After that, was there a time in which you became interested in coming to Kenosha to cover what was going on here?
Yeah, Shelby and Jorge, who are two of our reporters who I traveled with extensively, implored me to book the trip, and we had lengthy discussions with our editor-in-chief regarding whether or not we should go.
Eventually the decision was made to come here, is that
Correct.
fair to say?
Yes.
Do you remember when it was that you first arrived in Kenosha to begin covering these events?
Yes, it was that Monday.
Do you remember approximately what time of day?
It was the afternoon. I'm not sure. It was before it was dark.
There's been a lot of testimony about the events of that night, some of the things that happened around town. Did you personally witness any of that?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you personally witnessed?
Witnessed many cars being burned. I actually, Shelby recorded an interview with some of the individuals in front of, so there was the big car lot that was burned, but then there was the lot actually where the armed individuals were on the night of the shooting. We actually were in front of that business the night before, and Shelby recorded an interview where those individuals were, there were people who, I guess the owner of the business had asked people to go out and try to put out the fires. So she recorded an interview with individuals who were using a power washer, and there were other people using like buckets to try to put out fires with the cars.
Mr. McGinnis, we have a map on the wall behind you there. I don't think there's going to be dispute that we've established that on Monday night, the car source location, which is at the northeast corner of 59th and Sheridan Road, had a large number of cars that were destroyed by fire that night. Did you personally witness that?
Yes.
Now, you said you spoke to the owner of the business. That would be the car source business?
I didn't speak to the owner. I spoke to individuals who were out there trying to put out fires, and I believe in Shelby's interview they mentioned that the owner had asked them to come out to put out the fires.
Now, you also mentioned there was a second location, and that would be this car source, which is sort of kitty corner to the southwest. And I know you mentioned there were armed individuals there on Tuesday night, right?
Yes, and that's the same business that we saw people with power washers at the night before.
At this location that I'm highlighting here, which is at the southwest corner of 59th and Sheridan, on Monday night, did you see any armed individuals there?
I did not know.
Were there fires at that location on Monday night?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say you saw people putting out fires with pressure washers, were they putting out fires only at that location on the southwest corner, or were they also trying to put out the fires on the northeast corner?
It was only at that one, and I didn't see anybody trying to put out fires on the other one across the street.
Understood. I think the fires were out of control at that point, so I get that. I'm just trying to pin it down. So you told us that you witnessed the fires at those two locations on Monday night. Did you witness any other events on Monday night that were noteworthy?
Yes. There were fires everywhere. And Shelby, Jorge, and I recorded a number of those, including multiple businesses that were also burned.
And you recorded that information and then obviously published stories about it on the Daily Caller website. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, yeah.
I want to move to the next night, Tuesday night, August 25th, the night of the shooting. Did you come back to that area to view the events of that night?
Well, the way that it happened was we went to the courthouse to document the demonstrations that were happening in front of the courthouse, and then subsequently the police pushed the protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, away from the courthouse, and that's actually when everybody ended up in that area.
On Tuesday night, based on what you've just described, do you recall approximately when it was that you first got out and were covering things?
We'd been out all day. We were actually, during the day, we were interviewing the owners of the businesses that had been damaged the night before. And so, and also many people from the community in Kenosha came out to help clean up. And so we recorded a bunch of interviews with those folks, as well as getting aerial footage of the damage. And then we went and ate, and then we went back out before sunset as the demonstrators were arriving at the courthouse.
When you said you took video or photos or whatever of people trying to clean up and things like that, did any of that include the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse?
No.
Okay. I know you discussed some of the events that occurred right out in front of the courthouse. Do you recall approximately what time that was when you were here out in front of this building covering things?
We first got out there probably about 7 p.m.
And how long was it before the event occurred that you described as the police pushing people out of the way?
That was after dark, and it was probably closer to 8:30 or 9.
What did you do then?
Well, I was typically in these kind of situations, the goal is to show both what law enforcement are dealing with and what the protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, you want to show both situations. So you want to I was in the middle of the protesters on one side and the police on the other, and actually recorded a variety of things, including things being thrown, bricks being thrown at law enforcement, and then I returned to the hotel because there was no cell service to get Wi-Fi to communicate with folks back in Washington, D.C., as well as post the videos for our team to then redistribute.
What hotel were you staying at?
I forget the name of it. It's literally right there.
Is it the Stella?
Stella, correct.
And that's located a little bit off the map here, I think, to the north, but very close to where all this is happening?
Actually, my hotel window was on the 3rd or 4th floor, and it was overlooking that car lot right there.
That's actually the Stella there, isn't it? Yeah. After you returned to the hotel, you've described what you did there. Was there a time when you came back out onto the streets after your time at the hotel?
Yeah, I actually didn't. I didn't even post anything because when I returned to the hotel and got on the internet, I saw armed individuals in front of the same business that we had recorded people trying to put out fires the night prior, and in my mind that was a continuation of that story, and so I actually dropped what I was doing. I also had Shelby and Jorge who were out there, and once I saw people who were armed, the situation was clearly escalated in my mind in terms of the level of danger, and part of my role was also to make sure that none of us were harmed. And so I went outside, back outside, and actually I couldn't see that business from the window, but I could see the car lot across the street from it. And basically I just ran down the stairs and went right out there and started communicating with Shelby and Jorge to find out where they were.
The business where you saw the armed people out in front of, was that the Car Source location at the southwest corner of 59th and Sheridan?
Yes.
You mentioned that after seeing them you felt like the situation was escalating. Why did you feel that way?
Anytime that there are guns, that elevates the level of danger in my mind. just given that, I've been to, like I said, across the country, many protests in places where people have guns and there's a lot of people in a confined space. These are the kind of situations where everybody's very passionate about why they're out there. So, in my mind, that the presence of weapons meant that I should be on the ground, and Shelby, Jorge, and I should be as close to each other as possible to ensure that we're all safe.
So did you feel that the presence of guns at that location, did it make you concerned about the safety of your reporters?
Yes.
So you said you ran down the stairs of the hotel, and did you go then, after you left the hotel, did you go directly to that location, that car source at 59th and Sheridan?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've referred to guns. Are you familiar with guns yourself?
I'd say familiar.
One of the guns that we've talked about already in this case is it's technically a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, but it is an AR-15 type rifle.
Yep.
Are you familiar with that type of rifle?
I've shot it.
Okay. And when you got to that 59th Street car source location, did you see individuals who were armed with that type of rifle?
Yes, multiple.
Tell us what you did once you left the Stella and went to that location.
I went down and proceeded straight from the hotel to the car source, and basically as I walked up, I saw, I guess there were about 3 on the ground, and I couldn't quite tell how many people were on the roof, but there were like approximately 5 or 6 armed individuals in front of the business. And typically in these situations, especially with armed individuals, I'm just trying to look as unassuming as possible. And so I put my hands up and I said, hey, are any of you guys willing to do an interview about why you're here? Yeah.
Now you've given interviews to various media outlets about your experiences that night, correct?
Yes.
And at one point you described the appearance of these armed individuals at the 59th Street car source as menacing. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that. What interview was that?
Sure.
I wouldn't say that that's. I would say menacing is not a bad word to describe it. I would say actually, like I said, the presence of weapons, just in my mind, elevates the level of risk.
You did an interview shortly after this August 25th incident with someone by the name of Kyle Hooten. Do you know who that is?
Yes, I do.
And in that interview, at one point, you indicated that the group that was armed at 59th Street car source appeared menacing. Would you agree with that? We can play it.
I would agree. I would say that. I don't know the exact definition of the word menacing. I guess I was using it in a live interview, but I would say that the level of risk was elevated. Okay. Is what I would say.
One moment. interview that you did with Kyle Hooten. Do you recognize yourself on the screen?
Yeah.
And do you remember giving this interview to Mr. Hooten?
Yes.
Okay. Can we play the excerpt from 7:12 to 7:47, please?
I basically just walked up to them and said, is anybody willing to do an interview? And Kyle was just the most willing. And obviously that's the kind of situation where you have 5, 6 guys armed with some heavy weaponry. Most of them looked like they had AR-15 style rifles, and a couple of them were standing up on the rooftop in the darkness. So it was a menacing situation. So my goal was just to get my interview and be as non-threatening as possible and get out of there. So when Kyle volunteered himself, I just wanted to, go with the path of least resistance. And he actually.
Thanks. Okay. Does that help refresh your recollection?
Yeah.
And this was something that you said within a week or two after the incident.
I was in Kenosha when I recorded that interview. That's in the basement of the hotel.
Oh, okay. Good.
That
Thank
was
you.
like maybe a day or two after.
Now, when you, I think you said in that interview, when you approached the group, you wanted to interview someone from the group. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
How many members of that group did you interview?
One.
Who was that?
Well, I guess Mr. Gulch was the other one who walked into the interview as I was recording, Mr. Rittenhouse, and then we proceeded up the street after that. So if you would constitute that as part of the interview, then 2. But Mr. Rittenhouse was the only one that I interviewed prior to him arriving.
And I think you said Gulch, but actually, for the record, that's Ryan Balch.
Balch, sorry.
No
Yes.
problem. No problem. Did you ask, and for the record here, the person you interviewed, Kyle Rittenhouse, is seated here at council table with the gray suit and the red shirt. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Did you ask him how old he was?
I believe as I was taking out my phone, generally the procedure is, are you willing to do an interview? Yes. Okay, I'm going to record it. Yes. And I believe that I said something along the lines of, how old are you? And I believe the response was something along the lines of, I'm an adult. I actually don't recall because I was doing 2 things at once. But I just remember the answer being satisfactory enough for me to proceed with the interview.
If the defendant had been honest with you and told you that he was 17, would you have recorded an interview with him?
I would. In those instances, I can record an interview if somebody's a minor, but I need permission from the parents.
Based on what the defendant said to you, whatever the wording was, you had no indication from him that he was 17. Is that fair to say?
I actually told the police the night of that I believe that he was in his mid-20s, but I believe I said exactly that he had a baby face.
We've got the interview that you recorded, and that is exhibit number 16. Can we play that, please?
What are you doing out here? Obviously you're armed and you're in front of this business we saw burning last night, so what's up?
So people are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously. But I also have my med kit.
And what about these other folks? Obviously there's some other people who are armed as well.
Their job is to protect me.
Gotcha. And then what about these guys up on the roof?
Their job is to provide overwatch to protect me also.
Gotcha.
They're protecting everybody on the ground. We're protecting each other.
Understood. And
We're running medical, and we're going in, and we're getting people.
And what about, are you from the area?
I am from the area.
What brought you out here tonight? You just wanted to provide medical attention?
Provide medical attention to the people that need it. If somebody's injured, like, you get hurt, I'm grabbing you.
I'm getting hit with plenty of pepper balls, but
Your eyes good?
as long as it's just bruises. Yeah, I got my mask. I'm good.
All right.
And
That's about it.
have you encountered any issues yet thus far with law enforcement or anything like that?
We had a group earlier try to come and set a fire at the church. So we went to the church and we de-escalated the situation, telling them they need to leave or they will be detained and then arrested.
This church right over here?
That church right there. And we stomped the fire out all the way down at the school.
Wow. And what do you think it would have been different if the police had to try to stop them from setting the fire?
I feel like there would be a lot more casualties and a lot more people injured. So I think the police are fine where they're at and that let us run the medical because EMS is not coming in. It's considered a red zone to the EMS fire. They are not coming in.
Yeah.
So us citizens, we need to help each other. Me and him are out here running and seeing if people need medical attention.
But speaking of which, we need to go check to see if somebody got hurt again.
All right.
Understood.
If you want to follow us, you're fine.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Good night, Ann. This might be another one of theirs.
You are, at this point in the video, walking south along Sheridan behind the defendant and Ryan Balch. Is that right?
Correct.
At that moment, given what you've told us about why you were out there and the coverage you've done with other events around the country, why did you decide at that moment to follow them?
Well, during the interview, he mentioned, what his mission was there, and it seemed to me that they were proceeding to, try to do what he was talking about, and I wanted to record it.
Can we please play exhibit number 17?
Anybody need medical?
So you guys are kind of like medics who are packing.
Yeah,
right?
basically. Well, he's an EMT, and
Gotcha.
I'm just kind of protecting his ass.
Oh, so you're a certified EMT?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And do you work as an EMT normally?
I just got the thing and I'm a lifeguard normally. I got my ALS and I got my
Gotcha.
The defendant tells you that he is an EMT. Is that right?
Yes.
Did he say anything else to you? It's a little hard to hear in the video as to what his qualifications were.
I believe he mentioned something about lifeguard certification.
In your experience at the various events that you've covered, similar to what was going on in Kenosha, Seattle, Portland, etc., have you seen other individuals who proclaim themselves to be medics or EMTs who are armed with AR-15s?
I don't recall any people who... I saw a lot of people who were medics, some of whom were armed, but not with an AR-15 that I recall.
When you saw these other medics who were armed, what sort of things had they armed themselves with?
I just recall specifically in Seattle a medic armed with a handgun.
Other than that one medic with a handgun, do you recall seeing any other medics in any of the other events that you covered who armed themselves with a gun?
No.
Do you recall seeing any others that armed themselves with an AR-15?
No.
We can continue the video, please.
And I'm former Army infantry, and I got a whole bunch of trauma training.
Well, thank you for your service.
We got you if you get needed.
I appreciate the service.
Oh, shit. Shoot.
There. Do you? It appears Mr. Balch reacts to something at this point in the video. Do you know what that was?
That was I believe it was a brick that was thrown at, a piece of a brick that was thrown at the armored personnel carrier right there.
Did it bounce off towards you guys or something? Do you know?
Yeah, it bounced off in front of us.
Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. There's a guy with a rack. Be careful. Right behind that white fence, there are racks in there, so be careful.
Hey! Friendly! Coming through! Medical! 97
guys walking out the fire extinguishers are here to put out the fires? They know.
Okay, good.
They know. He just got shot up. You good? It's all right. Where you shot? I'm not shot. You just said you got shot. No, I didn't.
I thought you got rubber bullet.
Oh, no, I just got rubber bullet. Yeah. No, it didn't even leave a welt. It just stung. It just fucking stung. I'm fine. I knew.
Little pepper boy never hurt nobody.
It was literally just like, oh.
It's a little spicy, that's all.
It was like, oh shit, that was really annoying.
Yeah, a little salsa.
Could you please not? Does anybody need medical? Does anybody need medical? Thank you.
I think someone's got some medical weed, I'll tell you that.
Does anybody need medical? Medical! Hey, does anybody need medical? You were just the one to get off the car, trying to help you off the car. Now you trying to do medical? I remember you, bro. You said get off the car. Fuck you talking about medical? Yeah. Your ass is. Does anybody need medical? Medical! Medical!
What, yesterday or today?
Today. He just had up the gun talking about get off the car. Now he's talking about medical.
What car? Over in the dealership?
Car
Sorry,
down
I
there.
don't feel. Hey, if you wanna, that's cool. But no, I'm not gonna do it without your permission.
If I had it, the crowd wouldn't be right here right now.
I wouldn't fucking be trying to fuck the car though.
First of all, Mr. McGinnis, the video we just watched was.
Let's take a break at this point. Please don't talk about the case. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. 15 minutes. you cold?
Are you cold? I'm always cold. Oh. I have this draft. I always drink coffee. Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah. What?
Could you come down, please?
Okay. Thank you. You sweet.
Attorney Richards and I stipulated it's too hot.
Oh, are you? Yeah, my wife says that I'm too hot. No, that what does that mean?
Clear my throat.
hmm No, it's true. One of my daughters and I really, really turn it up high, and
The heat?
oh yeah, and the rest of the family is must be the chocolate I eat. I said it must be the chocolate that I eat.
And it's got sea salt in it. It's dark chocolate with sea salt.
And caramel.
Oh, and caramel?
I think that's what it said. It tastes like it.
I thought little
Either that or
thanks. Oh, thanks. I eat Cherry Valley chocolate.
if it's always been titled in his wife's name. The interlock device has been installed on our other car. Okay, let's proceed, Mr. Binger.
Thank you. Mr. McGinnis, when we left off, we had finished watching the video that is entitled Richie McGinnis Walking with Kyle. It is the one in which you followed him south along Sheridan. And at some point in the video, the defendant encounters a group of individuals. The most noteworthy of one is wearing bright yellow pants. Do you recall that?
I do, yeah.
And there's some interaction between the defendant and that individual, and then the defendant walks across Sheridan Road, but you stayed.
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, Kyle had told me my goal going into these protest zones is to tell the full picture, or our goal. And after interviewing Kyle, or Mr. Rittenhouse, it was clear, what he thought his mission was there. But these individuals seemed to think differently. And so I wanted to hear what their opinion was on the matter, because that would be part of providing the complete picture.
And the individual in the yellow pants accused the defendant of pointing his AR-15 at that individual. Is that fair to say?
I believe he said, yes, something along the lines of, you were waving the gun, you think you're in a movie.
When you approached those individuals to speak with them, you took your, was it your phone that you were recording with?
Yes.
You took your phone and you stopped recording. You pointed it to the ground, and then after a while it stopped.
Yeah.
We've established you're a video director for your website. Capturing video is one of the things you do. Why did you stop recording that interaction?
There were 4 individuals there, and you can see in the video one of them had large rocks in his hands. And, it's a public street, so generally speaking, but just from the perspective of an ethical perspective as a journalist or somebody providing content, you generally want to get the permission of people if you want to conduct a proper interview. When I walked up to them, one of the individuals who had these bricks in his hands stepped out on me like he was going to, smash my head. So I put my phone down and I told them, I'm not going to record. I just want to know why you guys are mad.
Did you ever ask any of them for permission to record them?
I did. So based on this guy's actions, they didn't want to be recorded. So I actually I was more concerned with why they were mad than actually getting it on video, just from the perspective of gathering information.
as someone who works in journalism and takes video, gathering information without having a record of it doesn't do much good, though, does it?
It can, because it does do good, because you can, from that information, then ascertain other individuals to talk to, and also I think there's an aspect of gaining somebody's trust before you conduct an interview. So a lot of times it's helpful to speak with people about why you're there, why you want to interview them, and then maybe try to restart and say, hey, now that we're on the same level, can I do this interview?
So the question I asked you right before that last one was, did you ask any of those individuals for permission to record them? And I don't believe you answered that question, but I'm assuming the answer is no, based on what you've told us.
I actually mentioned that I was going to stop I stopped my phone and I said, listen guys, I'm not recording this. I just want to know what the deal is. Why are you guys mad? Okay. So it was clear to me that there was no permission to be granted because the guy had bricks in his hands and he wanted to.
And again, I don't mean to be overly formal, Mr. McGinnis, but the question is, did you ask them for permission?
I did not.
Understood. And obviously they never verbally gave you permission, correct? They never said anything like, hey, go ahead, you can record us. Nothing like that.
No, they did not.
You took their reaction to you, this physical movement, as a sign that you shouldn't be recording them. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, yes.
You mentioned that one of the individuals had some things in his hand. I think at one point you said rocks, and another one I think you said bricks.
Well, it was like I guess bricks wouldn't be the right word either, because they're like gray. So I guess generally a brick would be like red. There were like pieces of gray stones that you would use to build a building.
Okay. How many of these individuals did you speak with that are all in a row there? Do you remember?
I talked to all of them.
But how many were there total?
There were 4.
Okay. And one you said had a couple of rocks or stone in his hand?
Yeah, one had like one in each hand, and then another one had like a stone in one hand, and then it was like a strap, leather strap, something like that. That seemed to be, couldn't tell if it was attached because it was in his hand. And I believe, yeah, those are the only guys who had rocks in their hands. There were 2 of them.
Okay. Other than what you've just described, did you see any other weapons of any kind on any of those 4 people?
At the time, I did not, but in hindsight, I believe that one of them was armed with a handgun.
With a handgun?
Yes.
Okay. The person who was wearing yellow pants did not have any sort of weapon, correct?
No.
Okay.
Not that I could see.
So just so we're clear, at that moment when you were dealing with those 4 individuals, you perceived 2 of them to have rocks in their hands, and that was the extent of any sort of weapon that any of them had that you saw at that time?
That I saw, yes. But in these kind of situations, it's never really clear who's armed and who's not. So, I was still unsure of my safety in that situation.
Were you armed?
No.
Can you help us understand what it was about these 4 individuals who, by the way, all 4 of them are black, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
What was it about these 4 individuals, 2 of whom had rocks in their hands, that made you concerned about your safety?
Well, the way that the one stepped out on me, it was like he was presenting the rocks as if he was ready to smash my head. And he stepped out in my direction, at which point I kind of took one step back. And in those kind of situations, I was trying to keep my distance to ensure that, if he's going to advance closer, then I'm going to take that many steps backwards to keep our distance. Yeah.
Do you have any idea why this individual stepped forward towards you in such an aggressive manner?
It was because of my phone. Because I believe that it was because he perceived me to be recording him, and he didn't want to be recorded.
Once you stopped recording, did his demeanor change?
I put my phone down, and then I told him I'm not recording, I just want to know what happened, and his demeanor did not change, and he still had the rocks in his hands, as if he was ready to hit me. And so then I said, hey guys, let's take a step back here for a second. Does anyone want to, I generally carry like cigarettes and White Claws, to diffuse these kind of situations. It's like a tactic. People are always really angry in these areas, and that's a good way to, I guess, break the ice.
So in your experience in these types of crowds, you have experienced anger, threatening behavior, that sort of thing before. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Definitely.
And one of the ways you've learned to diffuse the situation is to offer individuals something like cigarettes.
Anything, cigarette or White Claw. That's generally.
White Claw is a hard seltzer, an alcoholic beverage in a can.
And actually, I had 2 in my gas mask bag, and I just said, "Does anyone want a White Claw?" And it's like, people generally think it's kind of funny, and oftentimes take me up. And it's a good tactic to kind of, because the goal here is to elicit their truth, what they think is the reality in this situation. And so my goal is to basically make them feel comfortable telling me what they think the truth is, and that's one tactic to achieve that.
So when you offered these guys a White Claw, did they take you up on it?
One of them did, yeah. The guy who was squatting down in the image.
So you handed him the White Claw.
I said, "Do any of you want a White Claw?" I had my hands up, and I said, "I'm going to reach." And actually, the guy who was squatting down, he started to stand up. He said, "I'll take one." And I pulled it out, and I used to bartend, so I cracked it for him and then handed it to him.
So you gave them a total of 1?
1, yes.
This individual you described with the rocks who stepped forward to you, can you demonstrate for us the manner in which he was holding those rocks? Because you made it sound like he was about to hit you with them or something.
Yeah, it was. He was like holding it, as if like he was ready to fight, but with rocks. So, he was kind of in an athletic position, and he stepped out in front of the other guys towards me, like that.
And how close did he get to you?
Probably 8 feet.
Because
I took a step back when he took a step forward, and actually, that was part of the reason why they thought my actions were so funny to them, was that I was so scared and so ready to run away.
You say they thought your reactions were funny. How do you know they thought that they were funny?
Because they all laughed when I asked them if they wanted a White Claw, and actually after that, once I gave it to the one individual, they started making fun of the guy with the rocks, saying, "Oh, you think you're so tough? Like there's one of him and 4 of us, and like look at how scared he is."
Sounds like at that point, whatever tension was gone.
Correct.
Okay. And this individual stepped forward with the rocks. Did he ever throw a rock at you?
No, and actually he put his hands down at that point once his friend made fun of him.
Okay. You were never harmed in that incident in any way? Okay.
Nope.
All right. So we've seen the end of that video, which at that point you are talking with those 4 individuals when you stop recording on your phone. Is that fair to say?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. We just watched a video of you following the defendant and Ryan Balch down south on Sheridan. You encounter the individual with the yellow pants and the other 3 individuals next to him. You walk up to them after the defendant walks away. You start to have a conversation with those individuals, the 4 of them, and you stop recording.
Yes.
Okay. What I want to know is, after you stopped recording, how long did you spend talking to those guys?
It was a matter of minutes. I'd say less than 5 minutes. That whole interaction that I just described was probably about 2 minutes, and I talked to them for maybe another minute after that.
After that, what happened?
I got back to my task at hand, which was inquiring about why they were mad at who I later found out to be Mr. Rittenhouse. And they said something along the lines of, "Yeah, we were over there, we were jumping on some cars, and he came up with his gun." And that was actually, right then was the point that I saw Mr. Rittenhouse running down the street, and I said, "Hey guys, I gotta go."
Are you able to show us on that map, when you saw the defendant running, which you just described, where was that on that map? Are you able to show us that?
It was like, let's see, so we were right in this green right here. We were approximately right here at the green in the parking lot, and he was running this way.
Okay, you just kind of drew a line all the way from 60th down to 63rd. Are you able to be a little bit more specific as to where he was when you saw the defendant running?
So you're saying where was the defendant?
Yes. When you first saw him, you said he drew your attention because he was running.
Yeah, he was. So he was basically right running down this corner right here.
So you've indicated an area right in front of the Ultimate gas station.
It was in front of this. We were over here.
Okay.
And he was here.
All right. So again,
I don't. The gas station's up here. It was down here.
Okay. On that map, I think it's labeled the Ultimate Convenience Center, but it's the gas station that is on the southeast corner of 60th.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
And so, just because sometimes these things don't translate into the record, you've used the pointer to illuminate an area in front of the First United Methodist Church. On the east side of the church, between the church and Sheridan Road, there's a parking lot area there, and you've kind of pointed to that as where you were talking to these four gentlemen. Is that a fair summary of the location?
I believe actually it was a little bit further south, so it was like somewhere right around here.
Okay.
So sorry, it was actually just a bit farther. Is this south or?
The bottom of the map is south.
Bottom of the map is south, so it was a bit farther south than that. Yes.
Okay. And you saw the defendant running. Was the defendant in Sheridan Road when you saw him running?
Yes.
Did you see anything in his hands when you first saw him?
Yes.
What did you see?
He had one of those small fire extinguishers that you saw earlier in the video. It was that sized fire extinguisher in one hand and the AR-15 in the other.
What did you do next?
I told the guys that I had to go, and I proceeded after Mr. Rittenhouse.
Why?
Because, he had a fire extinguisher in his hand. So, I perceived that as he was running to some kind of event that was taking place that would be newsworthy.
What did you do after that?
I started jogging after him, and he was quite far in front of me, and I called my coworker Shelby to inquire where she was, because seeing the way that he was running and the fact that he had a fire extinguisher in his hand, I said something along the lines of I won't use the expletive language that I was using, but something's about to go down. Where are you? We should make sure we're close to each other.
You said you made a phone call to Shelby?
Yes.
Where were you physically when you made that phone call?
So I was in the process of, I was actually jogging, right around here.
You are pointing to an area on Sheridan Road, just to the north of 61st Street.
Yeah. I was probably right around this corner by that point that I called her. Actually, right around here, because I had opened my gas mask bag for the White Claw, and then I ran off without clipping it back. My gas mask actually fell out of the bag. So what happened was the gas mask fell out. I picked it up. I put it back in the bag. I clipped the bag, and then I pulled my phone out to call Shelby. So it was probably actually just south of there by the time I got on the phone with her.
You have given an interview in which you indicated that your attention was drawn, or when you saw the defendant running, that you felt that he was drawing the attention of the crowd. Do you recall saying that in one of your interviews?
Yeah, I think in that interview, I was referring. Which interview are you referring to?
I think it's the one that you gave to Tucker Carlson, actually. But I'm not.
Okay, I believe that I was referring to him shouting medical. And I did notice that when he was running, there were a lot of people looking in that direction. There were like, in this area, this parking lot here, there were like dozens, if not hundreds, of protesters or rioters or whatever you want to call them, right in here. And so when he was running, it was like kind of people directed their attention that way, for sure.
You also said that you felt that this was going to be a hairy situation. You also characterized it as a dangerous situation. Do you recall that?
Yes. The combination of the fire extinguisher and the fact that he was running indicated to me that something was about to happen. Potentially, if there's a fire involved. That's why I wanted to get a hold of Shelby and find out where she was.
Did you also feel that the defendant running with an AR-15 through this type of crowd could cause a problem?
In my mind, in that moment, I couldn't think of a situation that would necessitate somebody running through a public street with one of their hands occupied by a fire extinguisher and the other one occupied by a weapon, kind of serving dual roles there. That didn't. It seemed to me, it's not the way that I was taught to handle a weapon in a public place.
Did it seem a contradiction to you to have a weapon in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other?
I wouldn't say contradiction. I would say that, all these, like in these protest zones, there's like everybody's kind of serving a role. So there were like those punk rockers that we saw, the skateboarder dudes. They were clearly like kind of a fire brigade type because they all had fire extinguishers. And you have like people who are medics. You have all kinds of different roles. So I wouldn't say necessarily contradictory, because generally speaking, I just wouldn't deem that to be a contradiction.
The punk rockers, the fire brigade that you described, did you see any of them with guns?
I did not, no.
Did you feel that carrying around an AR-15 was incompatible with the role of a medic or the fire brigade?
I wouldn't use the word incompatible.
Certainly doesn't match up, though.
I don't know exactly what you're getting at, but I wouldn't say, I don't know what matching means here in this instance, if you could clarify that.
So you indicated that when you saw the defendant running, you left those four individuals and followed. You've described a point in that process where the gas mask fell to the ground, you picked it up, whatnot. Did there come a time when you were following the defendant when he was no longer running?
Right about, I was on the phone with Shelby at the time, and right about when he slowed down, I was still running to catch up. So he did slow and stop, down and around where the eventual shooting took place.
So he starts running, walks for a bit, and then there's a time after that when he begins to run again. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you in relation to the defendant as you're following him down Sheridan Road?
So he was probably just, at the moment that he slowed down, I was probably like a half a block back. He slowed down probably right around here, and I was like, I could just barely see him. And so I was probably right back here when he slowed down right around here, and I was still on the phone at the time.
When the defendant slowed down, were you still running?
Yes, I was running to catch up with them.
When you eventually caught up to him, how close were you behind him in the end?
So it's hard to, I guess, from the point where he was slowed down, when I caught up to him, it was just a moment after that he started running again. So I guess at that time, I was probably like 30 feet back.
And you described that the defendant then began running again.
Yes.
Was there any event that you perceived, that you heard or saw, that attracted your attention at the same time that the defendant started running?
There were a lot of people yelling.
Do you know what they were yelling?
There were a lot of screams. I heard like an N-word, and you can hear in the video the friendly, but it was mostly just yelling. I didn't hear really anything decipherable.
We've heard some references to that friendly. Now, I know it's hard, Mr. McGinnis. I'm going to try and ask you to put yourself back in the mindset of that evening. I assume since that evening, obviously you said you've given a lot of interviews, correct?
I gave as many interviews as I felt necessary to inform the public of what I saw.
And I wasn't trying to make it exaggerate or anything like that, but
No, that's fine.
you've given some interviews. There have been a lot of videos out there on the internet. I assume you've watched some of those. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. If we can try our best to put aside what we've learned since then and try and go back to that moment, and I'd like you to tell the jury what you were thinking and observing in that moment without the benefit of hindsight or other videos or things like that. Is that
Yes.
fair? Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned friendly. At that time, that moment, in that evening, do you recall hearing that?
I do not. I recall I was on the phone as well, so I was talking to Shelby, and I recall hearing the yelling while I was still on the phone, and I said something along the lines of, "Oh, expletive, I gotta go," and I hung up on Shelby, at which point that's when the running had started. Like, I was already basically running with Mr. Rittenhouse and later Mr. Rosenbaum at that moment.
So let's continue at where you just left off. Please tell us what happened next.
It was hard for me to see because, like I said, I was like 30 feet back at the time, but I could see a lot of yelling. I could hear a lot of yelling, and I could see there was a crowd of people in the street, and one individual, Mr. Rosenbaum, advancing towards Mr. Rittenhouse, as well as a couple of other individuals who were moving very quickly in the area. But it was hard for me to see because I was a little bit back, and it was dark.
What happened then?
Mr. Rosenbaum advanced towards Mr. Rittenhouse. Mr. Rittenhouse gave I think he maybe saw him coming and gave kind of I said on the night of to police that it was like a juke, but it was more like just a pivot and a run.
Please continue. What happened after that, as far as you recall?
And then he pivoted and he ran towards this parking lot right here. So he was like right on the side of the street, and he ran towards this lot, and Mr. Rosenbaum ran after him, and I was behind both of them.
So the sequence of the folks that were involved in this running, as we've seen in many other videos, is Mr. Rittenhouse is in front, Mr. Rosenbaum is running after him, and you are behind Mr. Rosenbaum. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
How far back from Mr. Rosenbaum were you as the pursuit went through the Car Source parking lot?
Well, it's hard to say because I kind of caught up to them. I was running a bit faster, and so at the time initially I was probably 30 feet back when everybody first started running, but then by the time I arrived in the lot, it was 15 feet.
And you continued to be behind Mr. Rosenbaum at the time that the defendant shot and killed him, correct?
I did alter my trajectory a little bit when I saw Mr. Rittenhouse turn around and saw Mr. Rosenbaum lunging for the front portion of the rifle.
Okay. Let me stop you there for a second. First of all, we know now that individual who was shot and killed by the defendant was Joseph Rosenbaum. At the moment this was all going on that night, did you have any idea who that person was?
No clue.
Had you ever heard the name Joseph Rosenbaum before?
I'd never even seen that individual.
Up until these events, you had not seen that individual at any time?
No, I had not.
Okay.
I saw videos after the fact of where he was, but I actually wasn't at that location, that gas station at that time.
And again, I want to hear what you saw and what you know, and not other stuff. In the videos of this incident, you appear to be holding up your cell phone.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Tell us about that.
So I got off the phone with Shelby, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So I attempted to record on my phone, and I thought that I was recording at the time. It turns out that I actually just took a live photo of the ground. I assume at the time that I pressed what was the photo button instead of the record button, the video button.
So as you're running, you're holding up the phone thinking you're recording video, but in fact you're not. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the video did not start until, and I've turned all this over, I'm sure you've reviewed it,
Sure.
but it did not start until just as I was arriving over Mr. Rosenbaum after he had been shot. So I don't know what happened in that period of time. I wasn't even looking at my phone. Usually when I'm recording, I'm constantly looking at what the video is recording to make sure that, everything's in the frame and whatever. But at that time, obviously, I was fixated on the situation in front of me rather than my phone, so I didn't realize that it wasn't recording. And I don't know what happened or why it started later.
What was it about the situation in front of you? You said you were fixated on it. What was it about the situation in front of you that focused your attention?
Well, there were we were running very quickly, number one. So I was just by virtue of the fact that I was running, I was focused on that. But also, I knew, having seen Mr. Rittenhouse earlier and just using my eyes at that time, that he was armed. And also, there was a bag that was thrown by Mr. Rosenbaum, and so clearly there was something about to happen. So I was paying attention to that.
Did you ever see a weapon on Mr. Rosenbaum?
I did not.
Never saw a gun on Mr. Rosenbaum?
I did not.
Never saw him have a knife?
Nope.
Never saw him have a club or a bat or a chain or anything like that?
I just saw the bag that was thrown. That was it.
As the chase is occurring in the Car Source parking lot, did you hear, and again, I want you to go back to that moment.
Yes.
We've seen other videos, we've heard other videos, so we have hindsight. But in that moment, as you are following the chase behind Mr. Rosenbaum, behind Mr. Rittenhouse, did you hear Mr. Rosenbaum say anything?
There was a FU. And at the time, in that instance, my recollection of it the night of, it was really hard for me to decipher, whether that was who yelled that. After seeing the footage, it's very clear to me who yelled it.
Okay, let me stop. I don't want to. I want to. In that moment, I'm interested in your perceptions of the sounds around you. So I understand there's a lot going on, and it's a scene. But put yourself back in that moment. Do you recall hearing Joseph Rosenbaum say anything?
No.
Do you recall hearing the defendant say
I
anything?
heard things said, but I don't recall it coming, me perceiving it coming from him, because, like, for example, in that instance, there was a pop, and then when Mr. Rittenhouse turned around, my focus was purely on the barrel of the weapon and where that was going, so I didn't.
Okay. In fact, when you were talking to the Kenosha Police Department after this incident, and very shortly thereafter, you were asked if you heard any words exchanged between Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Rittenhouse, and you said no.
Yeah,
saying that?
Well, that was the phrasing of the question, which is, were there words exchanged? And so that would imply, like some kind of conversation. If they had asked, did you hear Mr. Rosenbaum yell anything, I might have phrased it differently, because I just didn't focus on that at the time. But the way that there was nothing exchanged, that I saw.
So let's continue. You just mentioned hearing a pop sound. Was that during this chase?
That was right before Mr. Rittenhouse turned around during the chase. Yes.
Okay. And just to finish that thought up, you're talking about when Mr. Rittenhouse turns around and shoots Joseph Rosenbaum.
Correct.
Just before that, there was a pop sound.
Correct.
Again, with the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
But let's put that aside. In that moment, as you are running, first of all, did you hear that pop as you were running?
I did hear the pop, but given like the environment, it's not that uncommon to hear those kind of pops. So at that time, it was not clear to me that it was from a gun or what it was from. In fact, I did tell police that it was my understanding that he turned around because he felt like he was running into a corner, because that area of the parking lot where the shooting actually took place was like there's the wall right here, and then there was like cars parked, kind of. So it at night of it appeared to me that he turned around because he had reached a dead end or something like that.
Could you please pull up Exhibit 25? Mr. McGinnis, we have, and I think I need to turn on the TVs again. Mr. McGinnis, there is a video on the screen which has already been introduced into evidence, and we've heard some testimony about it. Have you ever seen this before?
I saw screenshots of this thermal footage.
Okay. Was that from yesterday or the day before during the trial?
Yeah.
Okay. There's been testimony that there is an individual with a circle around them identified as person of interest number 1. That is Joseph Rosenbaum. There is a square around a second individual who is identified there as person of interest number 2. That is the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
You will come into this video, if you're not already on it, behind all of them, so I'm sure you'll be able to recognize yourself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this forward a little bit so you can see it. I'd like you to pay attention to the movements of the 3 of you, Mr. Rosenbaum, yourself, and the defendant, and then I'll ask you a couple questions about it. So if we can play it forward, please. Let's pause it there, please. Were you able to see yourself on that video?
Yes.
Okay. And it shows you. Can we back up about 10 seconds, please? Go back a little bit further, please. 10 more seconds. Okay, continue there. Go forward, please. Or play it, rather. Thank you. Let's pause there. I don't know if it's possible, Mr. McGinnis, are you able to see yourself on that video at that very moment?
I think I'm one of those 2 people.
Okay. Let me continue forward, and unfortunately
it's
that
hard
laser
to tell.
doesn't
I
work
think
on
I'm
the TV.
right.
So
gotcha.
let's continue forward, and I'll pause in just a little bit here.
Yeah, now I can see me.
All right, pause. Mr. McGinnis, I've got a Sister Marciana's pointing device. The judge has allowed us to use. May I approach you on it? Yes. Could you please use this and go up to that screen in the corner, and can you point out yourself on that video?
I think it's hard to see right here, but can you just go back for a sec?
Yeah, why don't we rewind it?
I'm right under the text.
Yeah, let's go back 10 seconds and play from there. And then, Mr. McGinnis, just pause when you see yourself, or raise your hand when you see yourself, and we'll pause it, okay? Okay, can you hold it up there one more second, please? I didn't quite see. Okay, so just for the record, you are pointing to an area that is on the screen to the left of a vehicle that has, right or wrong, been referred to as a Duramax. Is that a thing, a Duramax?
Vehicle.
Is it? A Duramax vehicle. I know from other videos that this vehicle is parked in a way that the hood of the vehicle is to the lower lower right of this TV screen facing Sheridan Road. So if you'll accept that representation, then you're pointing to an area that is near the right, or the rear passenger corner of that Duramax. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit farther out here, right?
Okay. All right, let's continue the video forward, please. Pause. Can you use your Sister Marciana's pointer to show us where you are? Okay, and you can you hold it up there for a second longer so we can make sure we all see it? Okay, that is you. Now I can tell from that video that there appears to be part of your body extended forward. Is that your arm holding the cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. Was that your right arm, if you recall?
Usually it'd be my right arm.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
That good?
You can leave that up there. That's fine. Thank you. You can go ahead and have a seat, please. Now, this is stopped at a moment which is right around the time, I think we're maybe a frame or two before Mr. Rittenhouse fires and the shots at Mr. Rosenbaum. And everyone can see where you're at in relation to that. What I want you what I'd like you to do, Mr. McGinnis, is tell the jury in your own words, what was going on at this particular moment where we stopped in the video.
So basically, I was running behind Mr. Rittenhouse and Mr. Rosenbaum, and like I mentioned before, Mr. Rittenhouse turned around and Mr. Rosenbaum continued, and I was continuing, but then I realized, that they were about to basically collide, and so at that moment, I was still running, but just before the shots, I kind of altered my trajectory of my run a little bit in the direction that I perceived to be out of harm's way.
What do you mean harm's way? You were several feet away from them. What was the harm to you?
Well, once Mr. Rittenhouse turned around and Mr. Rosenbaum continued, it was a very short, very, very short period of time from when he turned around to when the shots were fired. And basically in that very short period of time, I realized that Mr. Rosenbaum was continuing to advance and that Mr. Rittenhouse was standing still, and that they would be, based on Mr. Rosenbaum's, the way that he was running and then eventually lunging towards the front portion of the rifle, it was clear to me that something with the weapon was about to happen, and I didn't want to be on the wrong side of that.
When you say something with the weapon was about to happen, what do you mean?
Well, it wasn't clear to me whether the weapon would be grabbed or fired or what exactly was going to happen, but it was clear to me that it was a situation where it was likely that something dangerous was going to happen, be it Mr. Rosenbaum grabbing it, Mr. Rittenhouse shooting it. I didn't know, but I knew that my eyes at that moment were, like in this exact moment, were fixated on the barrel of the weapon because I didn't want to end up on the receiving end of that.
You said your eyes were focused on the barrel of the weapon.
Yes.
Where was the barrel of the weapon pointed?
At this moment, when he stopped, it was aimed about 45 degrees at the ground.
Did the aim of the barrel of the weapon change?
It did. And when Mr. Rosenbaum lunged, Mr. Rittenhouse kind of dodged around, and then that's when it was leveled at Mr. Rosenbaum and fired.
What was the position of Mr. Rosenbaum's body when the defendant fired at him?
Well, there were 4 shots, but it was like in one continuous motion. It was like a lunge towards the front portion, a dodge around, and when he missed, his momentum continued forward.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second.
Yeah.
When he missed, who's he?
Mr. Rosenbaum, I'm sorry.
Please
Yes.
continue.
When Mr. Rosenbaum did not make contact with Mr. Rittenhouse, or it wasn't clear to me whether or not they made contact, but what was clear to me was that the trajectory of the rifle wasn't really altered by Mr. Rosenbaum's lunge. So if they did make contact, then it was just a glance. It wasn't enough to alter the trajectory of the rifle. But and again, this is just because that was the only thing that I was looking at that point, and it's not clear to me whether he basically fell forward, but that was as.
I'm going to stop you for a second because you said he again. Can you?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Okay. He fell forward.
Yes, like it was as if, if you were to lunge at somebody, if anybody were to lunge, they'd probably stop themselves, from falling face down on the ground, but the shots were fired in the exact instance that his momentum was going forward, and that continued until Mr. Rosenbaum landed on the ground.
When Mr. Rosenbaum landed on the ground after being shot by the defendant, what was Mr. Rosenbaum's body position?
He was lying face down.
Is it fair to say, if I'm understanding your testimony correctly, that when the defendant shot Mr. Rosenbaum was already falling forward?
His momentum, I wouldn't say falling, I would say his momentum was definitely going forward. It's not clear, to me whether he would have, fallen if, the shots hadn't been fired, but certainly his momentum was in the forward direction, and also his hands were out in front of his feet, such that his center of gravity was beyond where his feet were.
You gave an interview in which you characterized this incident as the defendant shooting Mr. Rosenbaum while Mr. Rosenbaum was falling. Do you recall saying that in an interview?
There were 4 shots, so I don't recall specifically saying that, but was that the direct quote?
Let's put it up on the screen.
I'm told that today lunch is here early, so I'll give you a few more minutes. Do you want to continue?
Could we just finish this little piece up, and then I'll break? Can we play this starting at the 52-second mark, please?
Well, Tucker, I was just about 10 or 12 feet behind them as they ran into the parking lot, and what I saw was Rosenbaum pursuing Rittenhouse, and Rittenhouse turned around. Now, right before he turned around, I'm not sure if this was a reason why he turned around, but there was a gunshot, and that's actually visible on video. It's not clear whether or not that gunshot was fired into the air or towards Rittenhouse, but Rittenhouse did turn around immediately after that. And at that point, he went from running away to aiming his weapon at Rosenbaum, and I was actually directly behind Rosenbaum. So I took 1 or 2 steps to my right as Rosenbaum was lunging for the barrel of the rifle, and he was that close to him. And Rittenhouse actually took the barrel of the rifle and just dodged around. And at that point, as Rosenbaum was falling forward, he fired quickly 4 shots into Rosenbaum, and at that point I was only about...
We just played an excerpt from a video interview that you did with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Do you recall this interview?
Yes.
And the date of this interview is August 28th, 2020.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3 days after the event occurred. Is that fair to say?
I think it was so it happened on a Tuesday, and I believe that was Friday.
Sure, 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
Fair to say that on Friday after this incident, your memory of it might be better than it is 14 months later?
It's just the same. I'm never going to forget it.
Generally speaking, people's memory is better when it's closer in time. You'd agree with that?
Yeah.
And you mentioned seeing some other videos before you gave this interview to Tucker Carlson. So you had watched some things in those 3 days, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. But in this video here, you are telling Fox News, Dr.
Mhm.
Carlson, that the defendant shot Mr. Rosenbaum as Mr. Rosenbaum was falling forward. Correct?
Yeah, it's unclear to me because the shots were so quick whether the shots are the reason why because he lunged and then the shot was fired as he was lunging, so it was like I guess perhaps it was the shots that caused him to then, rather than stopping himself, just fall flat.
That's not what you just said. Let's play this back about 20 seconds, please.
For the barrel of the rifle, and he was that close to him. And Rittenhouse actually took the barrel of the rifle and just dodged around. And at that point, as Rosenbaum was falling forward, he fired quickly 4 shots into Rosenbaum.
Your interview 3 days after this incident says that Mr. Rosenbaum was already falling forward when the defendant used the gun and discharged the shots.
I don't see why that's inconsistent with what I'm saying right now. He was lunging, falling. I would use those as synonymous terms in this situation because basically, he threw his momentum towards the weapon, and when the weapon wasn't there, his momentum was continuing, and that's the point at which he fired. So if you use the word falling or lunging, it was his momentum was going forward, and that's the point at which he fired the shots.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. A few seconds ago, you were saying that you weren't sure if Mr. Rosenbaum started falling because he was shot. But in your interview here, the falling is occurring before the defendant even shoots Mr. Rosenbaum.
That's not what I said.
According to your interview,
let me clarify. I said that I wasn't sure if he didn't catch himself because he was shot. Because you can lunge forward and then put your foot out and stop yourself from falling. So it wasn't clear to me, for example, if the shots had not been fired, it's not clear to me whether he would have fallen or whether he would have caught himself. That's what I meant when I said that.
At any rate, your statement in this interview and what you're telling us here today in person is that Mr. Rosenbaum was already falling forward when the defendant shot him. Is that accurate?
His momentum was going forward. I don't know, this term falling, I just wouldn't use that. So I'm not going to say that because that's not what I said.
You actually have said that. I'm using your words.
I'm not going to say that right now because I'm clarifying. It's correct. It was a live interview.
No. You can ask questions, but don't comment on the witness's testimony.
Fair enough. At any rate, whether it's the momentum, falling, however you want to put it, Mr. Rosenbaum was in that motion.
Yes.
Before the defendant shot him.
Yes.
Okay. We can take a break now, Your Honor.
All right, let's take a break. Folks, please don't talk about the case during the break. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. Any questions, anybody? Okay, thank you. I didn't even tell them that. I usually keep it a secret, and then they eat faster. But I was going to say about 12:30, but if you have somewhere, it's something you have to do or something. Okay, let's aim for 12:30 and hope that I get my haircut in time.